Halfway through Quantum of Solace, James Bond is pulled over by the local cops who ask to see inside his car boot. What's inside changes everything. In seconds we realise what's happened. Bond's ally, Rennie Mathis, was betrayed by the police chief he went to see. Bond is being framed for his murder and is meant to be killed during the arrest. Only... We figure out this entire plot in seconds, just from the reveal of Mathis in the boot, which is pretty efficient storytelling. You have two component parts, the film trusts you to put them together. But this is only one of 3 car boot scenes in Quantum of Solace that create something of a rhyme scheme within the movie. At the start of the film, Bond plucks Mr. White from his boot, revealing what was at stake during the film's opening chase and laying the groundwork for the story to follow, a valuable informant in MI6's possession. And at the end, the battle won, Bond motors into the desert, revealing Dominic Green as his captive. Not only is this apt payback for how Green treated Mathis, it's also a fitting end for a character whose plan had been to exploit a drought-stricken Bolivia for profit and power.
We won't find oil there.
But we own whatever we find.
Green conned the Bolivians into thinking he was a fool, expecting to find hidden oil deposits. Instead, he's after the water supply. And now, having cruelly stockpiled water in underground lakes, Green is left in the baking sun with only oil to drink. That oil, of course, was also a nod to another Bond ally Green had killed, Agent Fields. With this one gesture on Bond's part, we're reminded of 2 murders caused by Green that weigh on Bond, and the villain is given a comeuppance that befits his cruel scheme. Now he can gasp for water, just like the population he exploited. Nobody mentions any of this in the scene, but it's right there in imagery and character action. And that's what this video is about. Quantum of Solace has developed a reputation as not only a bad Bond film, but a bad movie. If you don't like it, that's totally fair enough, but I do, and I think there's a lot of good work here that gets missed. And that good work, and why the film's flaws cause you to miss it, is what I want to talk about in this video.
It's time to get out.
I'm Andrew Ellard, and this is Video Notes. When describing this movie, a lot of review summaries go like this. Following the death of Vesper, James Bond seeks revenge on the organisation behind her betrayal. The thing is, he doesn't.
Well, it'd be a pretty cold bastard who didn't want revenge for the death of someone he loved.
You don't have to worry about me.
Quantum of Solace isn't a revenge movie at all, not in the Liam Neeson's gonna kill his way through everyone sense. Quantum is about a man mistaken for being out for revenge. Hitchcock would have had a blast with the idea. I see how this happened, because the line, following the death of Vesper, in movie terms usually means a male hero is about to kick some heads. But this Bond, he is that cold bastard. In this setup scene with M, we're told about Yusuf Kabira, Vesper's boyfriend and the member of Quantum who positioned her to betray Bond and MI6. Bond pockets the picture, then dismisses the Vesper story as unimportant compared to the mission in hand.
I'm not going to go chasing him. He's not important.
Mr. White and his organisation. This is really important. Bond starts the movie tucking away his pain, his need for revenge, and gets on with the job. It's denial. It's telegraphed as denial, and, crucially, M notices that's what's going on. But he's not on a vengeance path. What follows is a movie where you're invited to examine the deaths Bond causes, but for the most part, they're all clear strategic choices. Mr. Slate in Port-au-Prince is an assassin who nearly stops Bond's mission before it starts. It's kill or be killed. The bodyguard in Brigands isn't killed by Bond. He drops him off a roof just enough to injure him, though admittedly it's unclear if this is simply Bond trying to escape, or so the man can be interrogated when Bond gets to the ground. Bond is wrongly assumed to have killed the man out of wild vengeance when it was Green's people who shot him. And who assumes Bond did it? M, who, having spotted his early denial, presumes a connection between the two while Bond is keeping them distinct. Then, in La Paz, Bond is set up for the murder of Rennie Mathis. Well, we know for sure he didn't do that one, no matter what the local corrupt police say about it.
What don't I know?
Rennie Mathis has been shot dead in Bolivia. The police claim it was Bond.
As we've seen, Bond is following a trail. He kills when he has to survive, and those kills are often presented as unfortunate. His license to kill is on trial here. Those deaths create waves and complications. For the first time, we really do what Austin Powers suggested and consider what happens if you murder a henchman. By the time M shows up to bring Bond in, Agent Fields is dead too, and Bond may be culpable, but he's not the cause. Fields took the right side against Green, out of choice, and there was a horrible cost to that.
Oh my gosh! I'm so sorry!
And here's where M realises that Bond isn't on some vengeance kick. She trusts him the moment she sees his face. Look at how she takes his word immediately when asking about Camille.
Just to tell you she's sorry, but this is not her fight.
It isn't. Let her go.
She isn't our concern.
But, under pressure from her superiors, she sticks to the plan she came here to execute.
When you can't tell your friends from your enemies, it's time to go.
Until Bond disarms her agents and comes back to her. This is crucial. He doesn't run off into the night, fleeing his captors to return to his revenge. He comes back to M, pays respect to Agent Fields, and insists that he's on the path to something important, something professional. And M, of course, believes him. She knew this was his nature from the previous movie.
I would ask you if you could remain emotionally detached. But I don't think that's your problem, is it, Bond?
No.
So M realises the rogue Bond she imagined isn't the man in front of her, and she puts resources into backing that play. Far from being a rogue agent revenge story, Bond goes from officially rogue to back under M's purview in less than 90 seconds.
You're removed from duty and suspended pending further investigation. You'll give whatever weapons you have to these men and leave with them now.
Mum,
Find out where he's going. He's onto something.
Mum, the CIA is
I
insisting.
don't give a shit about the CIA or their trumped up evidence. He's my agent, and I trust him. Go on.
Now, don't get me wrong, revenge has a significant role to play in this movie. It's not a story of revenge, but it is a story about it. For a start, you can't help but consider what would have happened if Bond had got hold of Vesper's boyfriend, Yusef Kabira, earlier in the movie. The franchise's main writers, Neil Purvis and Robert Wade, wrote early drafts where Bond is, indeed, pursuing vengeance. And there, he got hold of Kabira and tortured him, which sometimes feels like the movie this gets mistaken for. In fact, the whole film feels almost like a reaction against that idea. It's not that the film isn't also asking your opinion here. Do you think Bond is killing too quickly? Are these deaths the misplaced outcomes of buried pain? But Bond's not seeking revenge in any way that's driving the plot. Camille, however, is. Camille's the reflection of Bond here, the former agent who's committed herself to using Green to get to General Medrano, the man who killed her family, who raped her mother and sister, and burned Camille's home, leaving her permanently scarred. By 2008, director Mark Forster's films had often focused on pairs and parallels, be it author and subject, best friends, or man and woman united in grief.
Seems we're both using Green to get to somebody.
You lost somebody?
I did, yes.
Camille has all the motive in the world, and unlike Bond, she plans to take her revenge. When Camille is close to her target, Bond mentors her in how exactly to get the job done.
Have you ever killed someone? Your training will tell you that when the adrenaline kicks in, you should compensate. But part of you's not going to believe the training because this kill is personal. Take a deep breath. You only need one shot. Make it count.
It's a haunting moment where he can only imagine how it might feel to be able to act this emotionally, to let it all out and execute the man you truly want to kill. That's what this exchange was about.
You catch whoever did it?
No. Not yet.
Tell me when you do. I'd like to know how it feels.
Bond stays silent. He's never going to know how it feels. The job won't allow him that catharsis. He kills people he doesn't care about, but has to let the ones that matter live. It's a life of duty and despair, being tested to its extreme for the first time in his career. Camille kills Medrano, Bond captures Green, and, among other things, obtains the whereabouts of Yusef Kabira. And then, this.
Better keep thinking. He's dead. Now what?
Camille's had her revenge, and it's changed nothing for her. Bond gets to see what his arc through this movie might have been, and it's hollow. There's no solace to be found in executing revenge. The best he can do is suggest Camille carry on doing her duty.
All the down we saw will have to come down. And there'll be others too. Someone who worked for Green might be of help.
Not a bad idea.
Which is, of course, what he's going to do too. With Camille's bittersweet lesson aptly demonstrated, he says,
I don't think the dead care about vengeance.
And he heads off to face Yusef Kabira. Here in the cold of Russia, Bond carries the weight of the story he's just been through. M's view of vengeance and Camille's. And far from letting his blood boil and the torture begin, he does what he wishes he could have done before. He saves a female agent from Quantum's blackmail scheme. Corin here is on the same path as Vesper. In a scene inspired by a few lines from Fleming's 007 in New York, a short story that's otherwise more of a shopping list and a scrambled egg recipe, we drop into her life. Happy in a new relationship, love not around her neck, Corin's unaware that Kabira is an enemy agent who knows who she works for.
Corinne, I suggest you leave now. You contact your people and you tell them to check their seals. They have a leak.
In a few days, they'd fake his kidnap and threaten his life in order that Corin betray her country to benefit Quantum's agenda. M trusts Bond enough to take on this mission. Their relationship of trust is now healed, and Bond's found his peace, because if you're looking for solace, preventing Vesper's sad journey happening to someone else is a pretty good way to find it. So why does all this lovely rich stuff get missed? And why do people talk about Quantum of Solace as such a confusing movie? The problem is in the style of presentation more than anything else. This is a good story being told with texture, smarts and wit, but it's also stuck with a style that won't calm the hell down. First of all, the style doesn't give you time to connect to characters and drama before it's off again. We come into scenes hard and leave harder. Unlike the usual Bond rhythm, the audience isn't charmed or seduced. Your attention and emotional engagement is arrogantly assumed. In other words, it's edited as if you've just watched Casino Royale. And that, of course, is what a lot of viewers have found since. If you see Quantum of Solace back to back with Casino Royale the same day or over a weekend, it immediately feels richer. But if you see it, for example, in a cinema 2 years after you saw the last movie, it's a hard one to hold on to, invest in, care about. You're simply not connected to the Casino Royale emotions anymore. They become a few abstract facts. Daniel Craig's giving it his all with those haunted looks, but the scenes as edited aren't offering you much of a way into the character and the world. In some ways, the almost 4-act structure of Casino Royale, with its extended Venice coda, makes sense when you see that final section as, instead, the first act of Quantum of Solace. An agent who loved, lost to betrayal, and now has to process that, but with the romance indulged, so we care enough about that agent, that romance, and that betrayal.
It's time to get out. Job's done. The bitch is dead.
There's some really special moments in that film. Yeah. Very special. I don't know if the movie adheres together as well as it should, but that was just because the story it wasn't solid.
We just didn't get Bond's journey right in it, which is the key. It wasn't totally focused on his journey. And I think sometimes we can get too wound up in plot rather than keep to the story, which is an issue for these kind of films.
That difference between plot and story is vital. Quantum of Solace gives you the factual reason for Bond's mission, but not how he feels about it, what's driving him. A hole some audiences try to fill with revenge. It's not until 48 minutes in that Quantum of Solace truly settles down to let Bond have a full conversation uninterrupted.
I need a passport and matching credit card.
And MI6 ran out of plastic.
Well, oddly, right now, you're the only person I think I can trust.
That is odd. But I guess when one's young, it seems very easy to distinguish between right and wrong.
And that's just the emotional storytelling. The plotting is just as harshly handled. Because while sure, it's reasonable to assume everyone remembers this, and this,
Job's done. The bitch is dead.
it's a bit much to ask them to recall this detail after 2 years.
She had a boyfriend, a French Algerian. They were very much in love. He was kidnapped by the organization behind Le Chiffre, and they blackmailed her, threatening to kill him unless she cooperated.
And surely only fans had full recall of this.
I'm afraid your friend Mathis is really my friend Mathis.
Well, at least this clears Mathis.
We'll just prove that she's guilty, not that he's innocent.
Even the prop Quantum of Solace relies on for its final scenes hasn't been mentioned. We see it here 50 minutes in, but without perfect recall you'd be forgiven for thinking Bond gave it to Vesper. So if you forgot this from 2 years and 50 minutes ago...
It's an Algerian love note. Someone gave that to you.
Good luck taking away the full intended emotion and meaning from the middle and end scenes in Quantum. It's a strange thing to do so immediate a sequel and not help people back into the story. It's not that reminders aren't there at all. M tries to help us out in her first meeting with Bond.
Vesper's boyfriend, Yusuf Kabira, the one who was abducted in Morocco, the one she was trying to save.
It's that they're happening while you're looking elsewhere, thinking about something else.
His body was washed up on a beach in Ibiza.
Did you really take in this Vesper information first time, or were you playing catch-up with where we are and why, trying to recall Mr. White's place in the scheme of things? It's especially crazy that this problem's happening when the Bond title sequence is right there to be used and help us follow the story with a few choice reminders. The title sequence could easily have been used to show an abstract version of Vesper's story, loved, blackmailed, betraying Bond, the love knot and White featuring. It's worth noting that the writers often try to do more with the title sequences, offering details in the script, per this little moment in Casino Royale. And it's not just the previously on James Bond segment that's absent here. It's whole chunks of moment-to-moment information. Here's one example. Why exactly does Bond leap into action here? Bond doesn't know Camille's in danger yet, but off he goes. This is a horribly easy one to tidy up, too. If Bond's phone were hearing this discussion...
She's lovely.
Why don't you consider her something to sweeten the deal? Just promise me to drop her over the side when you're done.
He'd know they planned to kill Camille and throw her overboard. Bond already has Elvis's phone being tracked by MI6. Recut this moment to make it a live hack of the microphone and show a reaction shot or two to clarify what he's hearing, and you're there. Spinning forward, the boat sequence climaxes with this spectacular bit of business. Which is shot well, scored well, and lands as a strong conclusion to a breathless bit of action, only... what made it happen? We know it was Bond, look, there he is with the anchor, but after 13 years watching this movie, I can't for the life of me see the chain of cause and effect here. There's a rope given emphasis at the start of the sequence, and then there's this anchor, this unspools, and nope, still can't see it. Look how the opening car chase ends, with Bond pulling out a gun from the end of Casino Royale. Did you remember he still had that with him? Because if not, it doesn't so much feel like a setup and payoff as the convenient arrival of a problem-solving weapon just when he needs it. A structure seems absent even if it isn't, and starts to feel like a cheat. As an aside, it's been suggested that this opening car chase could have been cut entirely in favour of this roof chase, leading into the gun barrel and the opening titles. Nathan, I think we can cut that together, right? So, Quantum of Solace maybe opens on Sienna, Bond arriving at an MI6 safe house with White in his boot. We do the dialogue scene with M, spin on, the setup, the surprise, escape, foot chase, fast forward, the ropes for real actual tension, and bang, gun barrel titles. Yeah, that works. I don't think the gun barrel belongs there. Casino Royale's doing something very specific about Bond's first kill. But since there's no character or emotional story in the car chase, nor any clear stakes since we don't know White's in the boot, for sure it's a better action sequence to open on, more engaging, more personal, and far more tense. It's a very expensive segment to leave on the cutting room floor, though. Still, for all my ragging on the car chase, the film's hectic style has its plus sides. It matches a certain version of what Bond is going through emotionally, fixated on duty, aimed like a bullet. The thing is, that's what Bond does every movie. He does his duty and moves forwards. Meanwhile, the film's shot like a frantic revenge picture. Is it any wonder people mistook it for one when it looks so much like one? 007 is doing his duty even harder than normal is a reasonable idea, but should it really feel so different? Should the style really cause audiences to make the same mistake M did?
What happened to Slate?
I'm not dwelling on the past. I don't think you should either.
You killed him. Bond, are you missing the fact that you killed a member of Special Branch? I need you to come in.
And I would. But right now, I need to find the man who tried to kill you.
Restrict Bond's movements. You said you weren't motivated by revenge.
I'm motivated by my duty.
No. I think you're so blinded by inconsolable rage that you don't care who you hurt.
And that style means we hardly take in other details, like Camille's scars, which are only ever glimpsed in the edges of shot. You don't know if you're meant to notice or not, or if they're being edited around like Stamper's mismatched eye colour and swapped pleasure-pain responses in Tomorrow Never Dies. Those were shot for the film, then cut out, except where they sort of stayed in. Is something meant to be subtle, or is the editor hoping you won't notice at all? If anything, the real vice here is underplaying. Massively significant things are played so low-key as to be easily missed. Which is naturalism for its own sake, and fights the film around it. This is a Bond movie. Indulgence is coded into the character and the style. And while there's extravagance to the scale, the often excellent photography, the editing, all the directorial choices, they end up muting things that needed to be played loud. For example, this. Bond and Camille flew out to investigate Dominic Green's Tierra project. Attacked and barely surviving, they come across an underground lake. It's been deliberately dammed.
It's one dam. He's creating a drought. They'll have built others.
This is the moment the heroes of the movie discover the villain's evil scheme, the stockpile of a national resource. In the medium term, a lot of thirsty people will die. We're shown them in the next scene. And in the long term, well, Green and Quantum have plans for the whole region.
South America is falling like dominoes. You don't need another Marxist giving national resources to the people, do you?
Well, we can hardly be expected to do something about a coup we know nothing about.
As of this moment, my organization owns more than 60% of Bolivia's water supply.
This is it. This is the answer we've all been looking for. And Bond and Camille walk away from it, the find barely remarked. This is subtlety as a vice. It's mistaking the style of naturalism for indifference. It actively impedes the audience tracking the story. Because sure, we cover the medium and long-term issues in dialogue and visuals elsewhere, but in the short term, two filthy, bloody, battered agents are trapped in the desert and about to start a long, painful walk back to civilization, and neither of them think to drink the water or wash their wounds. That's just not how humans are. On a basic level, something feels wrong in this moment. In trying not to be too much like a Bond movie, Forster skates past the parts of the series that are human, that do speak to people. And within the movie, we know that Bolivia is dealing with a water shortage right now thanks to this.
He blames the water shortage on global warming.
And this Guillermo del Toro voice cameo.
You know, there are people in this country spending half their paycheck just to get clean water.
And of course, this. We absorb a lot of information as background. Indeed, the theme of water is all over the movie, echoing both Quantum's scheme and Vesper's death.
It's bottled water.
I like that stuff a lot, and broadly we can say it works. But then Agent Fields shows up in what is blatantly just an overcoat and a scowl.
Mr. Bond, my name's Fields. I'm from the consulate.
Of course you are. What do you do at the consulate, Fields?
That's not important.
Sometimes it feels like Quantum of Solace is just at odds with how humans think. Because we've seen enough movies to know that Fields is just a couple of scenes away from revealing the sexy little nothing she's wearing underneath. When you can't spy so much as a hem or a strap, that always means naked underneath.
Of course you are.
So clearly there was a scene cut, right? But look, I've asked around, researched as far as I could, and I can't find anyone who'll confirm this was the plan. At some point, the decision really does seem to be for Fields to simply dress bizarrely for the situation and the climate. To have a hidden outfit under her coat that was so small you'd never see it, but was also no functional part of the scene or a way into her character. Did this distract you as much as it did me? Because I was all ready to finally let it go, until this line popped up.
Do you want to go to a party?
Party? But I have nothing to wear.
Is this meant to be a joke? How can we tell? There are no clothes shown on the floor. Are we meant to take this line and apply it in retrospect to the coat that's now been removed? After all, that's how we're meant to know that Green informed on Yusuf Kabira. We never see Bond ask, and he only says,
I answered your questions. I told you what you wanted to know about Quantum.
It's only a scene or two later that we'll eventually realise Bond got here thanks to the intel he obtained. If we realise it at all. If, until watching this video, you thought MI6 had located Kabira and called Bond, I wouldn't blame you. It's like the clarity of this joke.
Is Mathis your cover name?
Yes.
Not a very good one, is it?
I was on my third watch before I realised that this wasn't some allusion to Mathis's cover name not being strong enough to protect his identity and keep him from being discovered and killed. Nope, it's Bond sharing one last laugh with his friend, ribbing him that his made-up name isn't very good. The circumstances muddy the setup, and so we don't grasp the humour. It's like Bond leaving Mathis's body in a dumpster. I like this as a character beat. Bond's refusal to sentimentalise reminds us of the maladjusted person you have to be to do this kind of work. But what's the purpose of dumping the body and making it half look like a robbery? You'd like to think this was Bond buying extra time before an investigation begins, fitting with Mathis's own pragmatism in Casino Royale.
Being dead doesn't mean one can't still be helpful.
But with dead cops on the street and the police chief already after Bond, it doesn't feel like there's much to gain from hiding one body. Likely this was an idea started in one draft, carried into another, with the subtlety of the film's style obscuring the conversation about just what happened here and why. Another victim of overt subtlety is Bond's restlessness. One of the biggest indicators that 007 is burying his pain and leaving it unprocessed comes in a trilogy of scenes. We have M at the start, Mathis in the middle, and Camille at the end.
When's the last time you slept?
So what's keeping you awake?
Do you think they'll be able to sleep now?
The idea is that when he's found his measure of peace, Bond will sleep again. The reason this slips by unnoticed, though, is because honestly, when was the last time you saw Bond fall asleep? He gets knocked unconscious a lot, but rarely dozes off. The main time you see 007 snoozing is when he's post-coital, and this movie's at pains to keep him moving right after the film's one and only bonk. It's a strong idea, it really is. It gives you an indication that Bond isn't okay somewhere underneath, and that this film is about getting him to somewhere where he can rest. But when Bond movies generally avoid showing you a snoozing 007, and the film doesn't feature much of anyone else sleeping either, Mathis here and Camille knocked out are about as close as you get, then how are you meant to feel the difference? The writing is trying to make it emotional, but the style reduces it to dialogue, to statements of fact. Had the film given Bond his sex scene, and when Fields wakes, he's never slept, been up all night, that might have helped put the emphasis where it needed to be. But in the rush of the movie, I didn't even notice this sleeping subplot until my second watch. And really, how is it meant to end if you wanted to do it visually? The last shot of a Bond movie surely can't be 007 getting into bed alone and dozing off. And that brings us to swagger. The strange cocksure confidence, no innuendo intended, of Bond and the movies, and arguably the thing that separates the series from the competition. It's Connery revealing a tux under his wetsuit, Moore and the Union flag parachute, it's Lazenby taking caviar after a fistfight, Dalton pulling a wheelie with a truck, it's Brosnan ignoring bullets at his head, and of course, this. And while I know I've given Quantum of Solace a hard time for its mishandling of style, the film's reputation as a thuggish, swagger-free, humourless 107 minutes baffles me a bit. On the one hand, sure, you have Bond completing a car battle with this. And that feels especially direct and leaden when you know we almost had stuff like this. But still, here's how Bond handles getting his car jammed onto a truck. That's a direct antecedent of the action in Casino Royale, where Bond uses fast, pragmatic thought to get from A to B with little fuss, but also a little cool. I love that the exposed door leaves him more vulnerable too. And in that tradition we get things like this. And this. And this. And this. And one of my favourites. There's plenty of swagger here, but it's tightened up so far that sometimes it shoots by too fast. But other times, it's bang on.
Can I offer an opinion?
I really think you people should find a better place to meet.
And sometimes Quantum takes it to a new extreme and you get this. And while I get that this sequence might be antithetical to how people want to experience Bond, where you're with him in the fight, not watching it from outside, the way this pushes the boundaries of what a Bond film might do, it feels exciting to me. The sequence is subjective, more the view of a bystander than Bond, and maybe that robs us of something, but it inserts poetry into a film that sometimes forgets it can be poetic as well as functional. In a gentle way, this feels like the path to Skyfall. On the other hand, you get these. I know we're looking for a certain swagger, but did it have to be done with the captions? Somehow these are alienating, distancing. They draw attention to the outside of the film when they should slide past. Informative but invisible. Did that car really just drive over a road marking for London? I speak as a serious nerd, but being cocky with your font choices is a seriously nerdy version of swagger. And if they're trying to be funny, they miss. Indeed, another aspect of the film that gets downplayed is the humour, and look, I work in TV comedy and I get it, Quantum's not a laugh riot, but there's loads here, certainly on par with other Bonds you love, including one of my favourites of the series.
We have a reservation.
Hola.
Hola.
¿Cómo está?
Very well, thank you.
Name?
Miss Fields.
Bueno.
You're going nowhere.
So shoot me. I'd rather stay in a morgue.
We are teachers on sabbatical. This fits our cover.
No, it doesn't. Get in. Get in.
Cállate. Cállate. Cállate, por favor, Taicito.
Hola. Somos maestros on año sabbatical. Y nos ganamos la lotería.
I know, a big gag and it's subtitled. But it's all about character, this. Bond's being a bit of a slave to his expensive tastes, but also playing with Fields. It's a flirting game, he's showing off. Told you this was where the film slowed down for a bit and became more like a Bond movie. Best of all, he's using his wits in the exact same way he does in combat, a fast solution to get from A to B. But okay, that one joke. What about...
I think she has handcuffs.
I do hope so.
Might need a little more than that. There are a lot of Dominic Greens. Do you have a social security or passport number?
You know, you should just answer CIA, Felix. A taxi driver told me where the office was.
Excuse me, Mum. We've done a complete forensic analysis of every note and its traceable history.
Not in the mood.
Your mother?
She likes to think so.
You know who Green is and you want to put us in bed with him. You aren't kidding, right?
Yeah, you're right. We should just deal with nice people. Those orders include my friend Mattis.
I'm sorry, I don't know who you are.
It probably came from some stream just around the corner from here. A bunch of little kids peeing in it.
Il prigioniere poi mi ha fatto anche torturare. E tu adesso che fai? Gli servi del vino?
È un vino qualsiasi.
Another one in the subtitles there, and sure, they're often wry rather than huge gags. But that was also the tone last time.
Vodka martini. Shaken or stirred?
Do I look like I give a damn?
Still, if you want big comic business, there is one running gag that never quite comes off. This is Elvis. First of all, it's fine if you never knew this guy was called Elvis. Like Fields' surname, it's buried in the credits. Elvis has a funny name, sort of, if you think that's funny, and a ridiculous haircut. And then this happens.
Oh my gosh! I'm so sorry!
And wait, did you see that? His wig fell off. Poll 100 people who saw Quantum of Solace and ask them if they remember a bit where the henchman's bad haircut is revealed to be a wig. I bet they didn't notice. In trying not to milk the gag, and you know what I mean by that, we go too far the other way and downright obscure it. The start of a 3-part running joke of humiliation is blown by being hard to see and quickly cut away from.
I'm so sorry!
3 parts? Oh, yeah, because next time we see Elvis, he's in a neck brace. Henchmanning is not going well for this guy. Fields really lands a blow there. And finally, when Green is fleeing for his life, this happens. Again, ask those 100 people if they noticed a henchman getting his clothes blown off. It's a curiously Germanic sense of humour. I actually like it. Bad people should be humiliated, and I'll never mind some silliness. But if you were lucky enough to spot it all happening, you sure weren't given the space to laugh out loud when it happened. If comedy is in the timing, the Elvis gags are as unfortunate as the character. Okay, so let's come back to the other common Quantum complaint, that it's too complicated.
Impress me.
We talked earlier about how sometimes the film doesn't showcase its big plot moments and certain physical moments that seem absent, but on the whole, well, let's watch a sequence through. One of the early ones that goes a bit fast and tends to shake people off.
This particular note from Mitchell's wallet may be of interest.
Mitchell, one of M's agents and a supposed friend, just tried to kill her. We know he's dirty. They check his finances and come back with very little bar one lead. Mitchell owned one of the bills MI6 had slipped into Le Chiffre's operation to track the chain.
A single bill could be a coincidence, but what about a whole stack? These bills, from the same series as Mitchell's, were just scanned at a bank in Port-au-Prince, Haiti.
Of course, this relies on the audience recalling Le Chiffre by name from 2 years ago, but otherwise it's clear enough. A character who links Mitchell to Quantum via these bills is in a hotel right now. Bond heads out to investigate. And yeah, it goes badly wrong. Still, Bond takes Slate's place and his briefcase and gets picked up by Camille. She's expecting him, but clearly doesn't expect to recognise him.
Get in!
What?
Get in. Dominic didn't give you any trouble.
Camille mentions a Dominic. She's using this guy to infiltrate an operation. Bond is more amused than surprised to discover that his mission as Slate is to assassinate Camille. He has no intention of doing that, but...
That wasn't very nice.
So Bond takes out Slate's ally and takes after Camille. She's with Dominic, who, it turns out, is well aware of Camille's plan. She's been using one of Dominic's geologists to uncover his scheme. We tuck that bit of information away for later. What geological plan is he cooking up?
All the information I found said there was nothing of value there. But Green's geologist had proved that there was.
We'll come back to it. So why does Camille need leverage? Because she needs Dominic to get to General Medrano, the man who murdered her family. Dominic plans to have Camille killed. Bond intervenes, and Camille says,
"You're not one of Green's!"
Dominic Green! And now Bond has a name. The man who hired Slate, who had the geologist Slate replaced killed, is Dominic Green.
CEO of Green Planet. It's a utility company, but Green's been doing a lot of philanthropic work buying up large tracts of land for ecological preserves.
MI6 let Bond know who Green is, and 007 is off, tracking the villain with ties to Mitchell, Mr. White, Slate and Le Chiffre. But hang on, wind that back. Even more stuff was going on there. What's Bond doing here?
The girl that just walked in here? Did you give her that? Tell her to call me.
To make tracking Green easier, he tricks Elvis into calling an MI6 number, the handy old cover Universal Exports. With that call made, Bond can stay on Green's tail. But hang on, wind that back, because even more stuff was going on. M hears Green's name and makes a call to the CIA, and this I love. Felix Leiter and a new colleague, Jeffrey Beam, are together. Nice to see Felix again, hurrah! Beam tells M that Green is not a person of interest, but M's smarter than that. She figures out the lie.
He's a person of extreme interest.
But he just said that he wasn't.
Tanner, I asked about the man and she transferred me to the section chief for South America. How would she know to do that if they weren't tracking him?
And sets Bond on the path. And then Green boards the plane containing Felix and Beam.
On board. Bonjour. Ça va? Ça va. Come. Have a seat.
This is one of my favourite little moments in the movie. You feel the story swell and get bigger. It's not just Bond versus an evil organisation now. It's that the organisation is in league with the American Secret Service. Nobody says it, but the cutting rhythm hands it to you. That plane, those characters. I gasped. And so begins a gorgeous little subplot for Felix Leiter. A less troublesome agent than Bond, Felix has been towing the CIA line and sticking with them even as they work with Quantum to carve up countries for oil and profit.
You don't need another Marxist giving national resources to the people, do you?
No, we can hardly be expected to do something about a coup we know nothing about.
Early on, Felix refuses to give up Bond for the deal.
You have any idea who that is?
Sorry.
A small act of loyalty and heroism that Beam clocks. He later belittles Leiter's idealism.
Yeah, you're right. We should just deal with nice people. I need to know you're on the team, Felix. I need to know you value your career.
And when we next see poor Felix, he's having a miserable time as a guest of the villain. By the time we catch up to him in Bolivia, he's ensconced in a dead-end position. The CIA have hollowed him out.
That's why I eat the peppers.
Well, all I'm saying is, you can't trust a damn thing around here.
But then Bond calls.
Incan exportar, buenas noches.
Incan exports there, by the way. That's a lovely little gag. Anyway, Bond and Felix meet.
You sure you're playing with the right side?
And with his loyalty to the CIA all but worn down, he gives Bond the intel he needs to put a stop to Green's plan with Medrano and the General.
Medrano can't move until he pays off the army and the police chief. Green's bringing him his money now. A hotel called the Perla de las Dunas in the desert.
He does this right under the nose of his superior, who thought they'd be able to shut Bond down at this meeting. Thought they could shut Bond down to benefit their combined interests with Quantum.
What the hell happened? What do you tell them?
Just what we agreed.
Right now, Bond isn't just battling MI6 and Quantum, he's also got the CIA to deal with. Oh, and...
If we refuse to do business with villains, we'd have almost no one to trade with.
Yeah, the British government have also taken Quantum's side over Bond's.
Pull him in, or the Americans will put him down.
When M takes Bond's side at the end of the second act, she's disobeying her superiors. But come the end of the movie...
Your friend Leiter's been promoted. He replaced Beam.
Well, then the right people kept their jobs.
Bond's entire mission made him the linchpin of an international situation where allies were just as culpable as enemies. Now I know, I just breezed through most of the plot of the movie. I meant to stay inside the margins of the Haiti sequence, but it turns out that that one sequence contains threads that join up the whole movie. It might be quick, but it's nothing like the unfinished, confusing screenplay it gets dismissed as. The writers, some credited, some uncredited, and because of the writers' strike, some who directed, produced, or starred, have a strong hold on how each of these pieces connect to each other. Nothing is wasted, nothing's forgotten, and nothing doesn't have a reason for being there. And having just walked through it, are you confused? It might be layered, but get past the style, and is it really so bewildering? It's not that there aren't fudges, it's that those fudges are minor. We talked about how Bond got into that boat battle, but here's how he ends it.
Excuse me. Thank you.
She tosses Camille to a man on the docks like he's leaving the keys with the valet, which is another bit of swagger, but doesn't he need to talk to Camille? This is one of those moments where you can feel different drafts fighting each other. On the one hand, the film needs to send Bond after Green, so he can reconnect with Camille later. On the other hand, he has little reason to leave her behind when she knows information he needs. We don't see him make the choice to follow Green or return to Camille, and that's a bad omission, but it's clear which way he has to go.
¿Hubo algún problema en asegurar el hotel?
Nada, ninguno. Son solo las celdas de combustible. Hace funcionar todo este complejo. Maldito quebradero de cabeza, la verdad.
A similar, almost works, but moment happens near the end when we're introduced to the world's most explosive hotel. It's a near miss, this one, helped along by the fact that we love an exploding base at the end of a Bond movie. They cleverly link its volatile power system to Green's apparent ecological concerns. But in the end, no way round it, the whole hotel explodes because a car crashed in the car park entrance. Speaking of plot cheating, there's this.
Bond, are you missing the fact that you killed a member of Special Branch? I need you to come in.
This is at once nifty and nasty. Bond knocks a man off a roof and Green has the man killed. But when M hears that, the circumstances have been reversed.
You killed a man in Brigands.
I did my best not to.
You shot him at point blank and threw him off a roof.
Shot and thrown off a roof, not thrown off a roof and shot. We know this is wrong. Seriously, why does anyone watching the movie think Bond's on a killing spree of revenge?
I'd hardly call that showing restraint, especially since he was a member of Special Branch.
Anyway, Bond finds out that a man he's killed was security for the British government, which is a hell of a thing. Quantum are bigger than we thought. Still, he's got M on the line. He can explain that he didn't kill the man. Only...
And I would. But right now, I need to find the man who tried to kill you.
He doesn't. He goes quiet. Which they almost manage to sell, as Bond so struck by the scale of Quantum's reach that he chooses to stay quiet and process the implications. The Prime Minister's name stops him cold. Plot blocking then, but it very nearly works. And since we're talking about this, let's take a look at one of the best choices the film makes amongst its severe editing, erasing the final scene they shot. So, do you remember this guy? This is the guy whose security Bond knocks off a roof. This is Guy Haines.
You don't know him?
Should I?
I suppose not. You haven't been keeping secrets as long as I have. He keeps a very low profile, but is one of the Prime Minister's closest advisors.
As originally filmed, Haines would have featured in the final scene of Quantum of Solace as a loose end for both 007 and Quantum. I've had to dig a little for this one. The deleted scene has never been released. There's no script available and online accounts are conflicting. But here's how it seems to have gone.
Congratulations.
For what? White's still missing and the organization is...
Okay, hang on, I know, this is the Quantum of Solace video game, but this was finished before the movie was completed, and the final scene was built to segue into the movie's ending. So...
I'm going inside.
We need Haines alive. Remember that.
Then, back to the film. We'd enter Guy Haines' home, but someone is waiting for Haines, and it's Mr. White. And note, this is the same three-part structure used for Has Bond Slept and the car boots. White escapes MI6 at the start, escapes Bond at the Quantum meeting in the middle by staying still, which is neat, and that pays off here.
Helt færdig var han nu ikke, for i den nye Bond-film dukker Mr. White op igen. Og han bliver for anden gang spillet af danske Jesper Christensen.
It wasn't your fault, but they know who you are.
Here in the deleted ending, Haines is startled by White. We don't really remember Haines, that he's a conspirator who's part of the UK government. His name is not a colour like slate, green and white, rather it's a reference writer Paul Haggis threw in to Strangers on a Train. But a recut might have helped us recall him at the end if we needed to. So, in the cutscene, White says he has to remove Haines, who's been identified as a member of Quantum. They are, of course, an organisation that does not tolerate failure. White aims, and bang! Bond would step out into the light, gun in hand. Mr. White slumps dead.
Mr. Haines, I think it's about time you stop talking to Quantum and start talking to me.
Who the hell are you?
Some say Bond stayed silent in this moment, Forster once again valuing something low-key over a catchphrase. Others say Craig said, "The name's Bond, James Bond." So let's assume they might have shot it both ways. Here's the thing. That's just the punchline from Casino Royale all over again.
The name's Bond. James Bond.
White gets shot, the question gets asked, and the catchphrase gets spoken or alluded to. It's not exactly a great final beat, is it? The same beat again. And more than that, this final scene would have shown Bond murdering Mr. White, arguably the person most directly responsible for Vesper's betrayal after Kibera. All that talk about solace and not needing revenge, and the final scene would be Bond executing White because it gets MI6 Haynes. He does it for the big picture. It's wrong. It's all wrong. This was a wise removal. The necklace is the right ending, assuming you remember the necklace at all.
Bond, I need you back.
I never left.
From a great decision to a more scrappy one, setting Quantum of Solace immediately after Casino Royale.
The bitch is dead.
Film critic Hulk says that. Seriously, do you realise that you could literally put the final confrontation scene of Quantum with the boyfriend who started it all right at the end of Casino Royale and it would change nothing? Meaning the entire film is just a 2-hour climactic fight scene to another movie? Which I don't buy. But let's try it for a second.
Fine. Anything for an easy life.
Sit down.
Sit down!
Obviously it doesn't work practically, but does it work thematically? That final scene with Yusef Kibera is the culmination of a story about revenge. Casino Royale isn't a story about revenge. The ending of Quantum is about choosing not to take that path and whether there's any solace to be found there, which is subtly different from Casino Royale's arc, where Bond learns to be aware of the big picture.
We're trying to find out how an entire network of terrorist groups is financed, and you give us one bomb maker. Hardly the big picture, wouldn't you say?
But you were so wrong! Because even after I slaughtered you and your little girlfriend, your people would still welcome me with open arms. Because they need what I know. So the big picture.
Film critic Hulk also says, Bond has no characterization, no dexterity, no personality, nothing, really, aside from being a stone-cold murderer up until a final admission. Like Hulk alluded to, the entire plot is one big chase scene in the name of Vesper Lynd. So, you know we don't agree. But there is a problem here, and we'll call it the Last Jedi problem. When Last Jedi picked up directly from the previous film, it ended up telling stories we felt like we knew already. Finn goes from self-interest to believing in the rebellion, which we'd kind of assumed would happen off-screen between films. Rey goes from Force-sensitive to somewhat trained, which we kind of figured would happen as well. It's not that these beats are uninteresting. There's real depth to how they're handled. It's just, this was all movement we expected to happen anyway. We expected Rey to train, Finn to join the Resistance. And we totally thought James Bond would start the next movie as a fully formed version of the character. The grief dealt with, the man now made and doing the job. There is rich texture in Quantum of Solace, but even I can't deny this one. It's a huge initial stumble to tell a story everyone had already drafted and concluded in their heads. And since we're looking at it, when is Quantum of Solace set? I mean, yes, immediately after Casino Royale, right? Bond's got Mr. White in the back of his car, and sure, Bond's not wearing the exact same costume as before, thanks to the licensing deal for his suits changing between films. But we get it's meant to be the same. And there's that same gun, yep, minutes later, picking right up. Only, look what's happened to Mathis.
Mathis.
MI6 have set him up in a villa because...
Poi quando hanno capito che non eri colpevole ti hanno anche comprato questa casa.
So for Mathis, it feels like it's been months. After investigation, he was fully acquitted and paid off with a mansion, into which he moved a girlfriend he's either acquired since or reconnected with. One suspects the latter because...
Suo uomo mi ha fatto imprigionare e poi mi ha fatto anche torturare. E tu adesso che fai? Gli servi del vino?
È un vino qualsiasi.
She knows him pretty well. When we last saw Mathis, he was being dragged away. Bond had a little more recovery time, transferred his poker winnings, and set sail with Vesper. How long do we reckon that is? Romance in the editing makes it feel like a while, but practically, with both sides waiting on the money, we're looking at maybe a fortnight. Then Vesper dies. Bond dries himself off and phones home, possibly on the same day, and he discovers that he's got Mr. White's number on the phone Vesper left for him. A lead to the organisation that used her. And we cut to Italy, Mr. White's villa. Now, sure, this might be within hours, but probably not. If it was, then Bond flew straight here while the Venice authorities were still investigating, picked up a company car, grabbed White, all while M immediately hopped on her own plane and travelled to Siena. Meaning this... and this... all happened on the same day. And judging from the light, it's not even lunchtime. If it is the same day, M's line...
You look like hell. When's the last time you slept?
...comes before Bond even reached nightfall on the day Vesper died. So, let's say he had a sad night in Venice and tracked White the next day. Which might at least allow time for MI6 to locate the supposed body of Vesper's boyfriend, a duplicate corpse Quantum had to organise, mutilate, and then have found by the authorities, which takes time. So here we go. For Bond, it's been about 48 hours. That's fine. For Felix Leiter, it seems to have been longer. With the casino mission over, he's been installed in the CIA's Bolivian office, which likely took weeks, though that might just squeeze into the time Bond spent recovering and on holiday. For Mathis, either he got interrogated, cleared, and given a villa in next to no time, or for him, it's been more like 2 months. It's fine, and if you prefer to, it is all technically explainable, but it's a fudge, you know? Let's finish up with a chat about some of the other highlights of Quantum of Solace, the franchise staples, starting with the Bond women. She may not be in the movie, but of course Vesper haunts everything here. You know how we talked about 3-part structures for Bond's inability to sleep and Mr. White's appearances? Something similar happens when we talk about Vesper. Part 1.
I was sorry to hear about Vesper. I think she loved you.
Right up until the moment she betrayed me.
She died for you.
Part 2.
Vesper. She gave everything for you. Forgive her.
Part 3.
Congratulations, you were right.
About what?
About Vesper.
And this is one of those bits that feels like a screenplay still in flux, because M never said this about Vesper. That was Mathis. All M said was...
We never really know anyone, do we?
Which feels like an error, but what he's actually referring to is this.
James, did you ever ask yourself why you weren't killed that night?
Isn't it obvious? She made a deal to spare your life in exchange for the money. I'm sure she hoped they would let her live.
But she must have known she was going to her death.
In her coded professional way, M's suggesting the same thing as Mathis. Vesper loved him and ultimately died for him. Only she said it a whole movie ago. Once again, good luck to audiences who didn't remember this specific exchange from 2 years earlier. Still in all, what you get here is Quantum of Solace playing out the arc begun at the end of Casino Royale. Bond's line, "The bitch is dead," taken from the novel, is delivered by Craig as an aspiration.
Job's done. The bitch is dead.
He wants to dismiss what he felt for Vesper. But can he? Quantum picks this up as Bond's quest to reconcile two ideas that sit uneasy. Vesper loved him and Vesper betrayed him. Bond starts the movie rejecting this entirely.
I wouldn't have thought Vesper the sentimental type.
But reconcile those two things, see Vesper reflected elsewhere, and you can find a little solace. And of course, part of that reconciliation is in seeing aspects of it playing out in the course of the story. It's in Mathis dying to help Bond, in Agent Fields doing the same. Oh yes, we were talking about girls, weren't we? And there's Agent Fields, the field agent. Only she's not. She's from a more bureaucratic part of Bond's world. Just like Vesper was. Not made for battle, just like Vesper wasn't. She's on the side of the angels, and just like Vesper, it costs her everything.
Why her, Bond? She was just supposed to send you home. She worked in an office, collecting reports.
I don't want to get too much into the fridging of women in Bond films, that's an essay in itself. Killing characters to advance a hero happens, rightly and wrongly, because films are about the hero. The problem is always that it seems to be the women who get it, because most films are about men. Fix that, rather than just the trope, and we'd be better off. But anyway, here Fields is the second Bond ally to die after Mathis, the latest in the series' long line of male allies to buy it. Which brings us to Camille, who commits the rare Bond girl twofer of not sleeping with Bond and surviving the movie.
Get in.
What?
Get in. Get in.
You gonna try and shoot me?
I said get in.
I love this little callback. We talked about Camille as a mirror for Bond, the revenge-taking agent out on her own. Unlike James, she has left her duty behind and fixated on a personal target.
My sources tell me you're Bolivian Secret Service. Or used to be.
Her movie is the one everyone mistakes this one for, and success is hollow, leaving her only duty to turn to. Her powerful backstory also gets you to this.
Sounds like you just lost another one.
This is a dark, unsettling moment where Bond has to make the horrible choice to kill Camille to save her from a painful, fiery death. Camille's reliving her childhood trauma. You can hear it in the background.
This way. This way.
And Bond looks to prevent that trauma playing out again. But this is also where he gets to come back from his own traumatic failure in Casino Royale. Where in that movie he lost Vesper to water, here he saves Camille from fire. And as if that weren't direct enough, remember this bit? We said earlier that this sequence needs clarifying. Bond's leaping into action to save Camille. It's just not executed right. Bond dashes to save her because, are you kidding me? He's got Vesper on his mind.
Just promise me to drop her over the side when you're done.
This woman, a potential ally, is going to be drowned if he can't get to her in time. How could the guy from Casino Royale stand by and let that happen? Bond's revenge, if anything, is about trying to save others from Vesper's fate. Camille from drowning and later by fire, Mathis from a betrayal, and Fields is also drowned, which he's meant to take in the same way as he did Solange in Casino Royale, but he makes a point to recover her reputation.
Miss Fields showed true bravery. I want that mentioned in your report.
And as we've seen, this all comes together with the film's final female character. Canadian government staffer Corin is specifically saved from Vesper's fate, and oh boy, the impact of this tiny line in a quiet moment.
Thank you.
Oh, and before we finish talking about the Bond girls, can we just admire this scene of Judi Dench taking off her makeup while still doing her job? It's a great detail and not one many would have thought to add. I love it. So, back to the Bond staples. Let's look at the villains. That weird Reservoir Dogs collection of Mr. White, Mr. Slate and Mr. Green. Slate, of course, is gone in a moment. Though I really enjoy how Quantum picks up on Casino Royale's new idea that Bond would need to patch himself up after a fight to keep up appearances. Mr. White lingers as this precise, haunting figure. Brief moments in Casino Royale, brief moments here. But he's got a gruesome sense of humour, and he's the only one smart enough not to be tricked by Bond into showing himself at the Quantum meeting.
Well, Tosca isn't for everyone.
He's memorable in spite of the limited screen time. And then there's Dominic Green, and look, I get it. Mathieu Amalric leans into the banality of evil. And though that does gain you some lovely understated horror...
Is he one of ours? No. Then he shouldn't be looking at me.
Mostly his form of evil wears the coat of an environmentally minded CEO or of an agreeable politician, at least until he becomes broadly disagreeable. But due to that same vice of subtlety, Dominic Green is refused chances to showboat, to revel in the Bond villainy, and indeed Silva in the next movie will be a significant effort to avoid this happening again.
Well, first time for everything.
But Green has this going on.
I remember when I was 15. I had a crush on one of my mother's piano students. Somehow, I overheard her saying very nasty things about me. I got so angry. I took a knife.
Which ultimately brings you to this. And while a man his size is blatantly no physical match for Bond on any normal day, this isn't a normal day, and Green is like a trapped animal who'll lash out any way he can to escape. There's something primal and dangerous about the way he lunges at Bond. You honestly believe he might do some real damage, because desperation is dangerous. And of course, in the end, the only person he hurts is himself. Which feels like it might be a bit of black comedy cut from the same cloth as Elvis's comedy, but it lands a lot better. Green's big scheme always worked for me too.
How much more pipeline do we need?
Ideally, 2,000 kilometers.
I'm still not sure that the Tierra project is the best use of Quantum's time. Perhaps we should shift our focus to the Canadian.
This is the world's most precious resource. We need to control as much of it as we can. Bolivia must be top priority.
Hoarding water is akin to the gold in Goldfinger, the oil in The World Is Not Enough, and the silicon in A View to a Kill. So we're in the ballpark of classic ideas, with the added bonus that this is just a means to a bigger end, toppling the world, a country at a time. World domination on its own rarely makes sense. Quantum's aim to destabilise the planet one country at a time until they hold all the power and wealth? That adds up.
With you tied up in the Middle East, South America is falling like dominoes.
And I mean, it's bigger than winning a card game to bring in an asset. So maybe, as we've said, it's not the ambition that's the problem, but rather that the scheme isn't delivered to the audience with enough flair. One final word about the action, since we're summing up. I really enjoy how the narrative of each fight relies on problems being solved by the ingenuity of the character. By car, boat or plane, Bond hasn't any buttons to press to get him out of trouble. The boat and plane have no weaponry. Can he use them to take out his opponents and escape? The smoke of a damaged engine, his fast reading of the road, a handy boat hook, this is all we've got. Sometimes it just comes down to falling as well as you're able. It's stripped down, and maybe too far, but I found this moment breathtaking. There'll be another time for hover gondolas, but the Craig era doesn't suit a super gadgeted Bond. And the failures of Spectre's action sequences are a video for another time.
Oh, you've got to be kidding me.
Finally, you can't talk about Bond staples without having a look at the music. Casino Royale ended with a definitive statement.
The name's Bond. James Bond.
.007 has earned his full theme at last, and it appears with gusto. So with Quantum, composer David Arnold faced a challenge. That same Last Jedi problem of a film that's about to dramatise things you kind of assumed had already happened. In practice, this means rewinding a little and saying, hang on, he's not quite Bond yet, he'll be Bond in a minute. Which means the score has to rein back the big theme a second time. The swagger once again put on hold. But instead, we get a contemplative melody that, I think, really holds the movie together. It shows up and pauses for thought even when Bond doesn't. Long after the film was completed, that melody would end up as a cracking Shirley Bassey number.
Where is the solace that I crave? Will it still haunt me to my grave?
Meanwhile, like Bond, we do get haunted by Vesper's theme from Casino Royale. Which brings us to the title song. I like it. It's the first Bond duet, which suits the Bond-Camille duality director Mark Forster was leaning into. The lyrics explore the paranoia of spycraft.
Another ringer with the slick trigger finger for Her Majesty. Another one with the golden tongue poison in your fantasy.
Unusually for spy thrillers, paranoia isn't really how Bond films work. We usually know who's a villain pretty quick. But it certainly fits how we can't trust Mitchell and the Colonel. Stylistically, it's a song with barbs. It doesn't want to be held, which is undoubtedly appropriate to the character and the movie, but it makes for a tough listen. Still, I do enjoy how it's made to feel a core part of the film because of the way David Arnold slides it into his score. And that's about it. I know for sure some of you are wondering why I've not talked more about the real-world circumstances around the movie. The writer's strike, the fast turnaround to get into theatres in 2 years. But in the end, every film hits problems. How you handle them is how good you are. Mark Forster might complain he only had 5 weeks to do his cut of the movie, but Martin Campbell had 5 to do his cut of Casino Royale. So clearly the rule isn't straightforwardly that X time in the edit equals Y quality of movie.
Dominic didn't give you any trouble, did he?
No.
What the hell is this?
And when it comes to scripts, no script is ever really finished. You just run out of time in the edit. When people talk about Quantum of Solace shooting with an unfinished script, they don't mean that the draft was incomplete, ending on page 65 with a note to fill in the rest. One way or another, professional screenwriters of quality turned in end-to-end drafts that, one would expect, contained complete stories. Indeed, there's that infamous Paul Haggis draft where the person Vesper died to rescue was her own baby. What Bond wants to know when he's interrogating Green is, where is she? He gives him the information he wants, which is strictly personal. We find Bond in Albania at an old Soviet-type orphanage. It's run by a religious order, and he goes back there and he finds that there's a child, and he takes the money and he hands it over to the nuns. Take care of her, and walks away, realising Vesper had betrayed him because there was a child. She had a child with this man she was in love with. We know that she was in love and this man betrayed her in Casino Royale, but then I thought that was not a strong enough reason to betray Bond. If there was a child involved that they'd taken from her and were holding, then that's a compelling reason to betray someone. We expect Bond to come and keep the child, but he doesn't. Bond realises he's just trying to give this child the best life he possibly can and walks away. And that's where M meets him. Out front, afterwards, in Albania, when he's walking away from the orphanage.
Not a very good one, is it?
Haggis apparently had trouble believing you'd betray Bond for another man. Me, I think that's a serious failure of empathy when it comes to saving a life for the sake of stealing some cash, and I'm hugely glad it was dropped. Every script is a rush of possibilities, finessing down to concrete realities. Every film is a billion decisions combined. What matters in the end is what we got, why it works and how it doesn't work and why. However you feel about Quantum of Solace, love it, loathe it, or somewhere in between, I hope we can agree on some of the good and bad things in this video. In the end, this is the pitch for the Quantum of Solace we got. When a double agent is revealed inside MI6, James Bond has to bury his grief and pursue the villainous organisation Quantum, whose schemes put him on the wrong side of both the CIA and the British government. But can he really hide from his grief in the relentless pursuit of duty? Where do you find solace if it's not in taking revenge? And if nothing else, that's a pretty strong concept for a movie. I'm Andrew Ellard, and this was Video Notes.